Welcome back, students. The purpose of this video is to help you question by question with the homework over compound inequalities. So ignore what homework number it says and focus on the title. If it says compound inequalities, then this is the video that you want to watch or watch part of to help you through the questions. So please feel free to skip ahead to whichever question you may have, but I'm going to go through question by question and answer the problem that is presented to me. My numbers are probably different than yours, but the strategy that we both use should be the same. Make sure that you do have a work page, and on your work page, make sure that you are labeling your name, the homework number, as well as what block, and then submit that work page to your teacher, however they have instructed you to do so. And then label which question you're working on, and then show your work for whatever that may be. So on question number 1, it says write the following as an inequality. So I'm going to translate my sentence into a math sentence. In my case, it's going to be an inequality because it uses the word greater than. Yours will be an inequality as well. So it says x is less than or equal to. All right, so x is less than or equal to 8 and greater than 2. So actually, I have less than or equal to. I also have greater than, which means that I have 2 inequalities that I'm going to use, which makes sense because I'm in the assignment compound inequalities. So compound, more than one. Think of a compound sentences. That's 2 sentences that you've combined into one. All right, so it's telling me that x, so I'm going to write down what my variable is. X is less than or equal to 8, so it's less than or equal to 8, but it's greater than 2. So here's my x, and it's greater than 2. All right, so this would be my compound inequality. My variable is sandwiched in between the 2 bounds, 2 and 8, and then make sure that you use the appropriate signs. If it's or equal to, then you're going to have that bar underneath. But here's what I would have, and then I would just type in my inequality over here in my box, and I would then make sure before I move on to the next question, I'm going to hit check and make sure that it's right. And if I miss it, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to figure out what I missed. The second question, I am going to be graphing the inequality that I'm given. In this case, I'm given that x is less than or equal to 1, or x is greater than or equal to 3. All right, so first inequality, it has an or equal to, which means my boundary point of 1 is going to be included, which means I'm going to have a closed circle. If I try to think of numbers that are less than 1, that could be 0, -1, and so on, but a number that's equal to 1 is 1. So that means that 1, the boundary point, is included as a solution, so this is going to be a closed circle that I use. For my other inequality, it also has an or equal to, so once again, I'm using a closed circle. It's possible that you have one of each, and it's possible that you're going to have both be the same. Then what I would do is, over at those boundary points, I would plot points at those boundaries. So I have a point, a closed circle that I plot at 1, and a closed point that I plot at 3. All right, now what I'm trying to do is think of where are my solutions going to lie, okay? Because now I'm going to click my this tool right here, which is going to highlight part of my number line. So notice that there are 3 possible sections for where I can have my solutions. I can have it be less than the 1, I can have it be in between 1 and 3, and I can have it be greater than 3. So now I need to come back over here, and I need to think about this. I have numbers that are less than or equal to 1. All right, and once again, numbers that are less than or equal to 1 could be 0. It could be -1. It could be 1 itself. It could be -2, and so on. So notice that those numbers, okay, what I want to do now is I want to use this tool, and I want to click on, use this tool, and I want to click on where those numbers are located that I just said would make a true statement. All right, but notice it says the word or, which means that this could also be true, and I would still have a possible solution. So what are numbers that are greater than or equal to 3? Well, that would be 3, that would be 4, that'd be 5, and so on. Notice I'm just listing integers, but decimals could also work as well. So then what I would do is I would get that same tool back, and where it's 3, 4, 5, 6, I would click for that section as well. And now I have both parts, and then I'm going to check my work to make sure it's right before I move on to my next question. Question number 3 is basically the reverse of question number 2. This time the graph has been provided, and now I need to make an inequality that represents the graph. So notice that there are 2 boundaries. I have a boundary point at -4 and at 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put down -4, and I'm going to write down 0. Notice that at -4, it's a closed circle, which means I'm either going to be using the less than or equal to or the greater than or equal to symbol. And at 0, it is an open circle, which means I'm either going to use a less than symbol or a greater than symbol. It tells me what variable I should be using, and in my case, it's x. And notice that the part that has been highlighted from the number line is in between the 2 boundaries. So where I'm going to place my variable is going to be in between my 2 boundary points. All right, so now I just need to figure out what's going to be my appropriate symbols. And so this one, -4, all right, -4 compared to these values, -3, -2, -1, these values are all bigger than, so greater than -4 or equal to, because I knew it had to be a closed circle. Okay, what other numbers do we have? Well, again, they're -3, -2, -1. How do those numbers compare to 0? And those numbers are less than 0. I already decided that that was going to be an open circle. So this right here is my compound inequality that I need to type in over here and check to make sure that it's right before I move on. Question number 4, I'm solving a compound inequality, which means I'm solving 2 inequalities. So I'm going to write down my 2 separate inequalities, and then I'm going to solve both of those inequalities. So in my first inequality, I find my variable. I separate my left-hand side from my right-hand side, and I notice that my variable's on the left-hand side, and it's being multiplied, and it's being subtracted. So I get rid of this -1 first by adding 1 to both sides. My -1 plus 1 cancels out. This leaves me with 4x is less than or equal to -1 plus 1 is 0. X is still being multiplied by 4, so the opposite of multiply is divide. I'm dividing by a positive number, which means I keep the same inequality, less than or equal to. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to divide. 4 divided by 4 cancels, leaving me with x is less than or equal to. And then 0 divided by 4 gives me 0. So there's one of mine. Okay, remember it's compound, meaning 2. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to solve my other inequality. So I'm going to get rid of the -1 first, which is unattached to the x. It's easier for us to get rid of things we're not attached to. So I still have 3 times x is greater than or equal to. 8 plus 1 is 9. X is being multiplied by 3, so the opposite of multiply is divide, both sides by 3. Again, I'm dividing by a positive, which means I keep the same inequality symbol. 3 divided by 3 cancels. I have x is greater than or equal to, and then 9 divided by 3 is 3. So I have my work over here, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph this. I guess first thing that I should note is since it's or equal to on both of these at my boundary points are going to be closed circles. These are going to be a part of my solution. So then I'm going to pick my closed circles. I'm going to plot 2 points, one at 0 and one at 3. This one is telling me that I'm going to use values that are less than 0. So think of numbers that are less than 0. That'd be -1, -2, and so on. So I'm going to click on that part of my number line. This one says numbers that are greater than 3 or equal to, but I already took care of the equal to part. So now I'm looking for numbers that are greater than 3, which would be 4, 5, 6, and so on. So I'm going to highlight that part of my number line. And then as always, I'm going to check my work and make sure it's right before I move on. Question number 5 is also solving a compound inequality. So make sure that you write both of your separate compound inequalities, and then you're going to solve both of them just like we have been. So just like you solve an equation, only thing that's different is if you multiply or divide by that negative, remember to switch your sign around. So here's my variable. It's being multiplied by 2 and adding 6, so I would subtract 6 on both sides. Plus 6 minus 6 cancels, leaving me with 2x is less than or equal to. 0 minus 6 is -6. X is being multiplied by positive 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by positive 2. Since that's a positive that I'm working with, I'm going to keep the same inequality symbol. And then I'm left with X is less than or equal to negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. On this one over here, I have X, it's being multiplied and subtracted. I'm going to get rid of the subtraction first. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. This leaves me with 3x is greater than, 3 plus 3 is 6. X is being multiplied, so the opposite is divide. I'm dividing by a positive, so my inequality symbol stays the same. This gives me X is greater than, and then 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this one tells me I have a boundary point at 2, but that's going to be an open circle. And then at negative 3, it's going to be a closed circle, okay, which means that it would be a part of my solution versus 2 is not a part of this solution. And then I'm going to graph these. So I'm going to take a closed circle and place that at negative 3. And then I'm going to take an open circle and place that at positive 2. Now what I need to do is figure out where am I going to highlight on this number line. And the first one is going to be numbers that are less than negative 3. So numbers that are less than negative 3 would be negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, and so on. This inequality tells me numbers that are greater than 2. So what are numbers greater than 2? Well, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So I'd highlight this part of my inequality. I don't have that part highlighted. It kind of looks like I do. But then I would check my work and make sure that it's right before I move on to the next question. Question number 6 and question number 7 are also solve the compound inequalities, so very similar to what we were doing with questions number 4 and question number 5. The first time that I went through this entire assignment, I had all or questions, and it is just luck of the draw. I went through and I kept clicking until I finally got an and question. So here is an example of how to do question 4, 5, 6, or 7 if you come up with an and compound inequality. So first thing is write down what are the two inequalities that you are given, and then we are going to solve both of these inequalities. Keyword now being is the word and instead of the or. So my first inequality, I have x that's being attached to 4, so it's being multiplied by 4 and a minus 2 on the same side, so I get rid of the plus 2 by adding 2 on both sides. The minus 2 plus 2 cancels. This leaves me with 4x is less than. 6 plus 2 would give me 8. 4 is being multiplied by, or x is being multiplied by 4, so the opposite of multiply is divide. So I divide both sides by 4. That's a positive number, so I keep the same inequality, and I get that x is less than 2. Over here, same thing, I separate the left side from my right-hand side. X is attached to 4, so I get rid of the minus 5 first. So since it's going to the opposite side, I do the opposite, and I add 5 on both sides. That leaves me with 4x is greater than, and then negative 29 plus 5 would give me negative 24. Divide both sides by 4, and since that's a positive, that means I'm keeping the same inequality symbol, and that's going to give me x is greater than, and then negative 24 divided by 4 is negative 6. So in this case, I have a less than, and in this case, I have a greater than symbol. Neither of those say or equal to, which means I'm going to use an open circle for both of these boundaries. So then I would come over here, and I would plot my 2 points at 2, with an open circle, and at negative 6, with an open circle. And then I need to ask myself, what numbers are less than 2? So what's a number less than 2? Well, 1, 0, negative 1, and so on. So I would click on this part of the graph where I have 1, 0, negative 1, and so on. This one's telling me what numbers are greater than negative 6. So that would be negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0. Hey, that's these numbers, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0. I already have those highlighted. All right, so this and is telling me that my selected part of the number line, the part where I have my true statements, are going to be in between these two boundaries. So like I said before, what you have is luck of the draw from ALEKS. You might have all or questions, you might have all and questions, or a combination of the two. But on questions 4, 5, 6, and 7, make sure that you are solving your compound inequalities, and then you're getting a graphical solution for what those solutions were that you had by hand. All right, hope that video helps.